Thank you all for your support and being here. My goal for LEA has always been narrow: to grow the number of people who know about LEA and are informed about the work of our legislature. I've always believed that everyone in the state should embrace LEA, but being politics, not everyone does. Thank you especially to our honorees who have done the hard work of getting elected, taking on the serious business of enacting law. I'm proud that our honorees pay attention to the LEA. Our work does not go unnoticed. Thank you. Thank you. In June 2024, Marcia Stromgren passed away. She took video of our banquet for quite a few years. She was a powerful force. She lived up in Duluth and she'd drive all the way down here to the banquet. It's pretty amazing. I often encouraged her not to drive home and she refused. Oh, strong lady. But she passed on again last June. And she's been a supporter and we miss her. So I'd like to just have a moment of silence for Marcia. We also want to get our report out a little sooner, and we're exploring ways to do that. Researching bills and fucking amendments, taking notes on committee meetings and floor sessions, that takes a lot of time. We can use some help. We will be recruiting researchers to help with these tasks. Sophie tonight. Thank you all. Our speaker, honorees, Alex Susko for our video, and Dan Huffman for our photos, and for all of you for your support. We have one more agenda item before the program, and that is our election and a little bit of business for LEA.
Election town?
Yeah.
Hello, my name's Ben Rickers, and I'm here to facilitate the elections of board members and also to share a little detail on what Don just mentioned in terms of a slightly expanded, more specific role for advisors. But first, the election. We have 4 open board seats right now, and we have 4 candidates. All the candidates have served multiple terms and are currently serving on the board. I will proceed by introducing the nominees, and please stand when I call your name. Gordon Anderson, Alex Bednar, Sue Erickson, and Jeremy Munson. Thank you. If there are no objections, we will elect the 4 nominees by acclamation.
No objections.
Hearing no objections, Gordon Anderson, Alex Bednar, Sue Erickson, and Jeremy Munson are elected to board positions by acclamation. So that was fast. Congratulations. Second thing I want to just touch on, and it's a little bit of a carry on from what Don mentioned, is expanding the role of advisors. Current role is general in nature and largely undefined. Advisors are copied on drafts of the annual report as we put it together. They're asked for their input about bills that should be evaluated. They are welcome to research bills and support the evaluation write-ups. And some are very good at kind of a final review. That's very helpful. Mark Olson comes to mind. The expanded role is we're asking advisors to commit 5 to 6 hours, not per week, not per month, but for the session, to do some research on one bill, a bill that we're considering including in the report. So research generally includes reading the bill and or a summary of the bill, making notes about it, what the bill specifically addresses, any concerns or other observations you have about the bill. This isn't really a write-up, but it's the materials that lead to a write-up. And feel free if you want to do more, but we're thinking this part of the responsibility is about 5 to 6 hours in total. So identifying the amount of appropriation and its purpose. Surprisingly to the first time you look at a bill, how hard it is to figure out how much money they actually appropriated. It's scattered all over the bill sometimes, and you really got to look for it. And then the other thing that can take time and is kind of interesting at the same time is listening to committee hearings. So that can be time consuming, but listening to committee hearings gives you a sense of how legislators are viewing the language that's being presented and how it is their concerns about it. And you kind of shorten the list. There could be 15 things to worry about, and you can tell by the focus of the questions that there's really these 3 things that are wrong with it. So, or right with it, or whichever. Usually wrong, unfortunately. So that's the expanded role. I'm going to send just a clipboard around, and just if you're interested in committing 5 to 6 hours, I'd like to get your name and your email address and your phone number, and we'll reach out and ask you just a few questions, and hopefully that'll work out for speeding the whole process up, which is a big challenge for us. So with that, back to you, Don.
Thank you, Ben. And I think where we're at this point is bring John up here and introduce our keynote speaker.
Do awards first. You get awards?
Oh, do the awards. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I got this out of order here. The awards. That would be Jeremy.
Okay. Well, we do have quite a few honorees this year. Boy, this is really loud. No way to turn this out. We do have a lot of honorees this year, which is good. It means we have more conservatives in the legislature that are looking to shrink government. So I will go through. I know that we have several honorees that are here and some that cannot make it. And so I'm going to start with, I believe Senator Bruce Anderson is not here, right?
Bruce is here.
Oh, he's here. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll start with Senator Bruce Anderson. I'm just going to mention a few things about the senators. I'm going to have everybody that's an honoree to come up to receive your award. I want you to tell the audience today how long you've served in the legislature, and if you have received an LEA award before, and tell us about a bill that you are the chief author of that is that falls in line with what LEA's credo is about, limited government and restoring liberty and along the vision of the founding fathers, what they imagined for our government. So Senator Anderson, come on up to get your award. Senator Anderson, how long have you been in the legislature?
Some people say too long. And then some people say, yeah, we want you to do a lifetime. And I'm going, talk to my wife. She's ready for me to retire. So.
And you received an award last year?
I received a reward last year, and I think, I received 15 or 16, 17 awards.
And then what bill are you the chief author of that would shrink government or?
Well, right now we're concerned about all the fraud and the abuse that's going on to the government. I put a bill that I have many members have signed on to. Of course, you could only have 5 in the Senate. Senate File 538 basically is looking at the contracts that are being let to nonprofits, which that's where a lot of our abuse and fraud is coming up, is through the nonprofits. So what we want to do is try to put somebody that is outside of the administration, the Department of Administration, to have insight as to what these contracts look like, where the money's going, how it's being sent out. So we're trying to pull back on some of the things that I had a bill. I had that bill before the Judiciary Committee. It was planned 2 weeks ago, and I had a little episode with my heart. So I ended up getting a stent in my heart, and so I ended up losing that opportunity to present. But they said they promised they're going to bring it back, so I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So you're flip over here first. Is that your award?
It's our first serial offender,
Yeah.
sir.
Congratulations. All right. Up next, we have Senator Cal Barr, who I had the pleasure with serving in the Minnesota House. And he since moved over to the Senate. You're in your first term in the Senate.
True. So total years, that's a touchy one. Total years in the legislature, I am now in my 9th year. I finished 8, did 6 in the House, 2 in the Senate so far, 2 years just left on this term. So a bill that I have chief sponsored, many of you in the room know me to be an outside of the box thinker. So, is this better back here? So it stops the whistle. I have a bill that I have chief authored now twice and brought back again that would allow you the choice on the ballot for partisan races to choose none of the above. For far too long, if you talk founding fathers, they talk about not being beholden to parties, not being beholden to groups, things like this, so that you could actually have a choice now, today, to choose something other than a flawed Republican or a flawed Democrat. But you could say, I don't like either of these candidates because I sense flaws in both of them. You could tell the actual the people running that you do not like this. Have if none of the above actually was the high vote getter, that seat would sit empty until the next election. But you would still have to maintain quorum. It would only take 1 or 2 times like that, and the powers that be would suddenly and magically say, you know what, maybe we should start putting a better product on the table because we're not in line with the public or in line with our voters. So I think that's the bill that you could highlight to say, yeah, that's a little bit of a freedom bill. Give you another choice. You don't have to choose Coke or Pepsi. You can have Fresca if you want.
Very good. And I'll say that Cal Barr has won LEA awards, I think, every year he's been elected except for 1 year when we had a special session, a month after session, and Cal had committed to driving long-haul truck out to California, so he was gone. So congratulations, Senator Barr, and you receive your award. Next up is Senator Steve Graskowski. Senator, yeah. See if I could do that. How many years have you been in?
I have been in, I think this is year 18 in the legislature. I was first elected in special election in 2007. When it comes to bills, I think of 2, but what I really want to talk about is something else. Is that all right? 2. I authored constitutional carry again. I was the first author of the constitutional carry bill in Minnesota in 2011, and I'll author it again this year. Also, just in the process of introducing a bill to get rid of all the taxes on charitable gambling organizations in the state. Just get rid of them so they don't hold them hostage for more gambling bills. But what I'm really excited about, Jeremy, is this. When we were in the new House Republican caucus, we passed into law a prohibition on legislators being lobbyists while they're legislators. Remember that?
Yep.
A legislator lobbyist bill. One part of that got left undone because at the end of the bill, it said, this shall be enacted by each house enacting it through their rules. Today in the Minnesota Senate, we adopted rules with it reflected right in the Senate rules. You can't be a legislator and a lobbyist at the same time.
Yeah. Good job. Yep, and Senator Drazkowski served in the House for a long time, and I think his bathroom is tiled with these LEA awards. So he's received a lot of them. Senator Justin Eichhorn, is he here today? He's not here. Okay. So Senator Eichhorn was elected to the Senate in 2016. He's in his third term. I don't know if he has won LEA awards, but I will make sure that we send it with the senator to so that he can receive his award. Senator Steve Green is here today. I served with him in the Minnesota House. He's in his freshman term in the Senate. One thing I really love about this senator is that he is the go-to guy on pushing back against the state regulatory agencies and all their environmental crap that they push. And he's just been also on the government land grab. Every year when the government takes thousands, tens of thousands of acres out of private hands, and either puts it into the DNR or other organizations, he's an outspoken critic against growth of government. So, Senator, congratulations. Tell us about a bill that you got that would shrink government.
20 years.
Oh yeah, how many years?
I've been 12 years. I was 10 years in the House. And it's kind of strange for me because I never wanted to be there that long. And so when they redistrict, and I made up my mind at that point, if they pair him with another Republican, I'm done. And they did. And I sat at my desk, and it was just like a weight lifted off me. And then I find out that the Senate seat is open. It's got 3 reservations in the city of Bemidji, which are pretty liberal. So between my wife and I decided I'd be back in. So I'm on my first term in the Senate. My bills, the 2 that I've got this year, are kind of along the same line. I picked up in an environment committee because no one was doing it, and everybody thought that, that's the state owning land is great, and I'm telling you, no, it's not. But this year, I'm after the DNR again, and I've got a bill that would turn their COs under the authority of the local sheriff, because they're very much abusing their power out there, and they're trampling on our Fourth Amendment. And the next one is like it. They can no longer do illegal search and seizures, because most people don't know that the DNR takes it upon themselves to walk into your house and say, well, we have the authority to come in here and check you without a proper warrant, and as long as we feel that there's something in here that we might be able to find, and that includes your car and whatever. So the 2 bills would to end that illegal search and seizure, and also put them under the control of an elected official in the county. And I'm hoping to get some traction on them. If not this year, we'll keep coming back for it.
Great. Thank you. Okay, is Senator Jeff Howell here? No. He did not make it today. Okay. Senator Howell also served in the House from 2013 to 2018, and is in his freshman term in the Senate, actually second term in the Senate. And not sure if he's won LEA awards, but we'll get his award to him. Senator Mark Coran is also not here, but I worked with him quite a bit, and he's been a great leader in the Senate. Senator Bill Liskey, he's in his freshman term. Congratulations, Senator. One thing I've tried to think of to say about you that's the most impressive thing, and I would have to say it's that you represent Northfield, which is like one of the cities to the left of Minneapolis, and he's receiving an award at the LEA. Congratulations.
So, as Jeremy told us, so this is my 3rd year, my freshman term. I would say that's a lot more than I expected. I got involved with health freedom, became a real issue. So I've been working towards some health freedom bills. They're a little too in the weeds probably to talk about tonight. But what I will talk about is my chief author bill that maybe will also be a little in the weeds, but food freedom, cottage foods. I want you to be able to make food and sell it to your neighbors and not get in trouble for it. So I've been really fighting hard for that to continue in the Senate. And so Minnesota Department of Agriculture has been very opposed, and I keep working hard to try and make those things change. So that's where I'm at.
Great. Congratulations. I was a chief author of Food Freedom Bill, and that's a great bill to allow people to sell foods at farmers markets that are otherwise restricted. You just have to disclose they're not made in a USDA approved $500,000 kitchen. So great. Senator Eric Lucero. He's going to sing a Valentine's ballad.
Don't sing candy. We're just showing off.
Congratulations, Senator. How long have you served?
Well, thank you everybody for coming. Wow, thank you everybody for coming out. It's my 11th year serving in the legislature, 8 years in the House, in my 3rd year in the Senate, and it's a true honor to come to these each and every year. I think I missed my first year when I was in the House, but aside from that, I've been here and I see all the friendly faces. Again, it's always deeply appreciative, whether it be this event or events across the state in other formats. The fact that we are sticking together and continue to advance is having an impact on the hearts and minds for those that may not be paying as much attention as we are. It is having an impact, and we're seeing that in each of the cycles where we have more and more legislators that are getting elected that are standing up for the constitutional principles for this great republic. The bill that I guess I would highlight so we're only, 6 weeks or so into the session. I think I'm over 100 bills already this year alone. And, but the one that, among those that I think would resonate with this group is one county, one senator, or one senator, one county, however you want to say it. So I'm sick and tired of the legislature being controlled by the metrocentric population centers in Minnesota. I completely understand how we need to have a lower body that is indeed apportioned based on population, but the upper body at the national level is apportioned in a different model, and we're familiar with that. Right. The bill that I have introduced, it's a constitutional amendment that would apportion the upper body here in the state of Minnesota to be based on per county. So I am, unfortunately, growing government a little bit by increasing the Senate from 67 to 87. Hence growing government, but then apportioning a senator to each county. Because the delegation in Hennepin County and Ramsey County and Olmsted County and Stearns County and whatever county is for Duluth, what is it? St. Louis County should not be dictated the entire state. But anyway, yeah, that's what I would say. I already have a picture with Don, but I don't have with you yet. So you got to call me.
Right there.
Video work here. Give it to him.
Go for it.
Oh, that's cool.
Awesome.
It's the video. Okay. This is the here's the project. Leave me here.
That's a video.
Thank you.
Oh, give me the mic.
No. Oh yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Senator Recke can't be with us today. We'll get his award to him. And then Senator Nathan Wiesenberg. Firebrand to the Senate. Congratulations, sir. How long have you served? You're in your freshman term?
This is my freshman term in the office, so this is my first term, 3rd year. I never thought I'd be a politician, I guess, but government pushed me too far, and here I am, and I didn't have any representation. So it's my lovely wife's birthday today. Janice here with me. So my wife's a doctor, so I went through all the COVID and saw the inside, all the things we know now that are true, and we were told they were lies. So I have to never again be able to get rid of all those emergency powers. And I didn't bring my phone crew with me, but we hear, well, what happens if something happens? We have cell phones now. We could make that part of it. If we need to contact everybody, or if we all need to contact each other, we could be on there in a minute, right? If there's an EMP, well, the police officers already have a solution for that. We can be part of that, and we can still flip the switch, and we can still have the phone. So the governor can never have power to shut us down again and kill people and shut our businesses down and ruin our country. That's horrible. So, and I like to push the red button.
You like to?
That's good. That's good. That's a good. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Congratulations. I started my write up on all the senators. I was going to do a Google search and find the biggest headline that the liberal media is attacking these individuals with. And of course, if you Google Senator Riesenberg, you come up with his bill to make eating beaver in Minnesota legal again, because the legislature banned eating beaver last year. And
I'll just talk about it big. I was gonna talk about it, but yeah. So we banned eating beaver, which is ridiculous, and they wanted $500,000 to live trap a beaver. Like, this is dumb. So we stopped that. In the Senate, we got it to stop. In the House, they put it in there to make it illegal to eat beaver. Somehow, it went back in that omnibus bill in the middle of the night that weighs 22 pounds. So we're actually working on getting it out again. But I am having a beaver eating fundraiser on March 22nd, and it will sponsor it. So.
Hey, oh, you got it. Okay, all right. Okay, well, that wraps up the honorees this year. We need to figure out the mic issue before Mr. Buccinelli speaks. Does anybody know if we can turn down the volume? Is it?
I can ask.
Okay. Or is maybe this one's better?
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, that wraps it up, and thank you again for all the honorees for doing your job and restricting government.
Time for John and
John?
our speaker. Jeremy, turn Mike or the other one. Turn the other one. See if that helps.
It's not us. But let me just turn this one off, and I'll turn this one on and see if this is any better. Yeah. Test. Yeah, this one's much better. Yeah.
We got me. Okay, good evening. Thanks all for coming tonight. Hope we had enough cake and punch. I ordered that shortly after advance registration deadline, but way before a lot of other people signed up at the last minute. So hopefully have enough food for everyone. Thanks to Natalia, Mermaid, and Nellie, and all the other servers tonight. If we give them a hand, I think they did a good job in putting that to use. And thanks to all the rest of the board, and to Susan and Alex helping with registration. Everything seemed to go reasonably. So as far as the menu, I guess we probably didn't make our speaker that much at home. We did offer the Italian dinner, but maybe the Midwestern comfort food is an adventure for him. So tonight I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because you want to hear the keynote speaker, but I have some things to say, and I just want to let you know that I'm going to speak pretty fast. So if you want to hear it, listen, or maybe you'll hear it later when Alex has it on video for us. So talk about a couple of changes passed into law that we outlined in the 2024 report, some legal and constitutional issues that have arisen in the wake of the November election, and then finally our keynote speaker, Kent Cuccinelli. Last year there was a little less action than the blitzkrieg of legislation we witnessed in 2023, no less chaotic at the end of session, with a 1,400-page Grand Theft Omnibus bill ran through by the majority right as time was expiring. However, there are two other bills I would like to discuss that could have major repercussions going forward. There was the bill inaccurately described as the Education Supplemental Budget Bill. There was more money spent for supposed need to compensate teachers more to implement READ Act rather than reallocating existing funds, which is ridiculous considering how much we raised the budget during the budget year. But the bill also contained plenty of harmful policy changes. It required all school employees be paid fully on partial day closures, including for canceled before or after school programs. Maybe that's where the idea came from for some legislators to demand pay without doing work. More honestly, it removed the conscientious objection exemption for vaccination at the request of licensed daycare centers. Finally, it added a new standard for graduation requirements,
Recently, the social studies standard was rewritten to require indigenous education and other ideological studies based on race and group identity. The 2024 supplemental bill required that health be added as a content area for graduation standards. The content area must include topics of mental health, substance use, sexually transmitted infection education, and may include ideological safe and supported schools, anti-bullying education. Standards will be adopted through rulemaking process proposed by the same dubious public health bureaucracy that gave us the insanity of gender-affirming care and the COVID emergency orders. We have to keep a spotlight on this and make them try to justify whatever they propose. The other bill I want to talk about is the 2024 election omnibus bill. In 2022, Minnesota already had some of the most radical and least secure election policies in the nation. With the 2023 trifecta, they passed 3 or 4 other bills to make election law even worse. Last year, before rules had even been implemented or adopted to implement some of the 2023 laws, they passed another revolutionary election bill. Candidates associated with deep fakes can be assessed extreme penalties, such as removal from the ballot or being barred to run for future office. One person's parody communication is another person's deep fake. So it's not surprising this arbitrary speech restriction is being challenged in the courts. Less known are the details of the revolutionary part of the bill called the Minnesota Voting Rights Act. The Attorney General, county attorneys, groups, or individual members of recognized protected classes are given opportunities to challenge elections after they are concluded, not available to other Minnesotans. Courts are ordered to act in an expedited manner to address the challengers' concerns of vote suppression and vote dilution. Factors used as evidence of violations can include overt or subtle racial appeals by campaigns or officials, lack of responsiveness to the particularized needs of protected class members, and polarized voting defined as the extent to which the electoral choices of historically underrepresented protected classes deviate from the electoral choices of voters in general. Suggested remedies for the courts to order include alternative polling places more accessible by protected classes, proportional cumulative or ranked choice voting, or overturning redistricting. It is not an exaggeration to say it elevates cultural Marxism and group identity as the basis of election law legitimacy. I haven't found a similar law like this anywhere else in the country. Perhaps Ken knows, but I have not seen it. It has not been used here yet, but if the leftists feel they could need it to maintain their hold on power, it will undoubtedly be used. And there are enough liberal judges in this state to make it a real option for them. Now I'll talk a bit about the legal and constitutional issues raised after the November elections, where the governor issued improper writs of special elections during Christmas vacation with improper filing periods, and where one party in the House did not even show up at opening day of session to be sworn in to do work, all to minimize the amount of time the Republicans might have majority control of anything. Their position basically amounts to, well, the voters voted for tied party representation in November, so it would be unfair for that not to happen due to the technicality of one candidate not establishing residency to be eligible for office. Candidate actions or qualifications are irrelevant, as long as the election day results are reflected in proportional party representation. This is how we got an American presidency on autopilot, where the office holder was clearly exhibiting dementia. Who the office holder is becomes irrelevant in this type of thinking. The opposition was, you have to follow the Constitution and statutes, determine a quorum based on the number of qualified members, and not call special elections with improper filing periods when there's no final determination of vacancy. The Minnesota Supreme Court unbelievably agreed with us on the governor prematurely calling the special elections, since the final determination of legislator eligibility rests with the legislative body itself. But unfortunately not on the quorum issue, despite precedents to the contrary. Chaos resulted. DFL House members did not take the oath of office on the first day of session in the manner prescribed by Minnesota Statute 3.05 and did not show up for the first 3 weeks of start of session, but still got paid. Meanwhile, the House was not able to compel the attendance of absent members to achieve a quorum, as is permitted by Article 4, Section 13 of the Minnesota Constitution, and was adjourned for more than 3 days during session without the consent of the other body, which is prohibited by Article 4, Section 12. The irony of the special election vacancy dispute is that if the governor and his DFL House members had recognized the actions of the Republicans on the first day of session as legitimate, the vacancy could have been filled sooner than it will be. This is because the first action the House attempted to take after being sworn in was to pass a resolution accepting the judge's opinion on the eligibility of Curtis Johnson, thereby creating an official vacancy for which the governor had 5 days to issue a writ of special election. Because he did not accept the legitimacy of that action, he had to wait 22 days after the start of session before calling a special election as a result of a vacancy arising from a successful election contest. Special election could have already been held for that seat if the governor had just followed the law. But instead it won't happen until March 11th, all because the DFL wanted as few days of official Republican control of the legislative body as possible. The roots of the chaos even precede the current election cycle. Legislators who wanted to avoid the inconvenience of moving during the holidays inserted a provision into the 2023 Omnibus State Government Bill, which changed the start of sessions in odd years to the first Tuesday after the second Monday in January. This directly contradicts Article 7, Section 7 of the Minnesota Constitution, which states that the official year begins on the first Monday in January in each year and that all terms of office terminate at that time. Because an elected official's term cannot begin until he is sworn in on the first day of session, it creates at least a 1-week gap every 2 years in which there is legally no state house and no legislature at all in the year following state senate elections. This governor and his allies tried to exploit this gap by declaring an imminent vacancy once the old term legally ended before the legislature could meet to make a final determination on Curtis Johnson's eligibility. That really upsets the balance of power among the various branches and invites mischief that can undermine proper governing process. All legislators here, we need to get a constitutional amendment to realign the start of a legislative term with the start of the official year again. That should not be hard to do. That there's no honest way to argue against doing so. Now about the scorecard results. Our 2024 report scored all 201 legislators on the same 16 votes. This resulted in 11 legislators meriting honorary status in our 2024 report and awards here tonight at the banquet. All were from the Senate. Why? Well, some of the senators that consistently score highly in our reports, as we've seen, Skeeter Skowski, Eric Lucero, Cal Barr, Steve Green recently, they came from the House. They built up solid records as House members, and I think that emboldened some of the other senators to vote in the same manner after they joined the Senate, knowing they would not be alone in standing up for the Constitution and basic principles of order and liberty. The Republican Senate leadership of the COVID emergency era that demanded loyalty to very flawed deals they negotiated was gone as well. Okay, but what about the House? Well, we do have a freshman member here tonight that might have a chance to be an honoree next year. Representative Drew Roach came here tonight. Thank him for his attendance. And we also have former legislators that have supported us for many times over the years. Besides our current board member, Jeremy Munson, we have Mark Olson, who served honorably in the legislature and on our board of directors. And Tad Jube has been at many of our events as well. So thank you very much for coming. And the voters, I don't know exactly why the House, when we voted on the same 201, scored the same bills. I don't know why the House didn't end up here, but what I can tell you is I live in one of many districts where the Republican candidate on the November ballot cautiously talked about bringing balance to state government without being too bold about what he might specifically favor or oppose. And the voters listened. So balance is the mandate, whatever that means. When it comes to turning back all the damage that's happened the past couple of years, I will say that it appears the House leadership this year is attempting to steer the government in a more conservative direction. They have to keep pushing because the leftists will fight to preserve every bit of power and influence they have gained. Finally, it's time to talk about tonight's keynote speaker. Ken Cuccinelli has served as a legislator and Attorney General in the state of Virginia. He also served in the first Trump administration in Immigration Services and Homeland Security. Last year's speaker, Steve Deace, is a prolific author and commentator, not afraid to critique popular culture or popular political figures, and has faced criticism in return. This year's speaker has also boldly defended conservative ideas and policies, but with the added visibility of being in the arena as elected and appointed official. Consequently, the vitriol of opposition while serving has been even more intense. If you doubt me, you can look at the comments on his Facebook page back from when he was in the first Trump administration. Yet he has not given ground on what he believes and who he supports just to be more likable. I appreciate his strong advice on immigration and elections, even if some of his colleagues do not. I like that he posted a faith-based defense of reining in unchecked immigration recently on his social media. And of course I like that when he was looking for research on the history of Minnesota election law, he took former Secretary of State candidate Kim Crockett's recommendation and called me out of the blue a year ago. He wasn't going to find me on LinkedIn or other professional sites touting my work, but he found me through word of mouth. I helped a couple of times last year, and when we were trying to find a speaker for this year's banquet, I figured it would be great if we could get him. He has done anything we asked him to do to promote the event and make it a reality. He's currently the national chairman of the Election Transparency Initiative. If you look at the election integrity questionnaire they send out to prospective candidates, Minnesota is not doing well on most election integrity issues. So election integrity should be a priority for conservative legislators, along with other fraud prevention, taxpayer relief, and measures to protect us from the negative impacts of massive illegal immigration. Mr. Cuccinelli is well qualified to provide us with experienced advice on these matters, so let's hear what he is ready to say to us and come up with some good questions to give even more valuable advice from tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ken Cuccinelli.
Well, good evening, and I'll try not to yell at you. I am a little bit about me. I was before I went to the dark side, went to law school as an engineer, and I am an efficiency nut. And I was in the state Senate. Very pleased to see so many state senators here. I would tell you in Virginia the houses would be flipped. And for whatever reason, it tends to be that way in most states. State senates seem to be a house of lords wherever you go, and but not here. That's very impressive, and congratulations to all the award winners. I was in the state Senate in the 2000s, and it wasn't hard to decide under then Governor Tim Kaine that I didn't think Virginia government was working very well. And so I ran for Attorney General. And one of the things about being Attorney General, I won, was you and your lawyers are at the table for everything the state government does. And as bad as I thought it was when I was in the state Senate and I thought I was paying close attention, I was badly underestimating the bad. Lo and behold, a few months in, and Governing Magazine, there's a magazine for everything, voted Virginia the best managed state. And I got a hold of that, saw it, and thought, well, God help the other 49. So in preparing for tonight, I went and took a look at one of our coalition partners, Heritage Foundation. They score all the states on the quality of their elections, and you all rank number 42. And so you might equally say, well, God help the other 8. But there's plenty to do. And of course, for those of you who have been paying attention for a long time, you know that George Soros and started with several other billionaires in the 2004 election cycle to, in their view, invest in the election process, not just elections, not just raising money for candidates, though they did that as well, including paying attention to things like Secretary of State candidates long before we were. And now, as you've seen, the latest cycle is local prosecutors. And Minnesota was home to one of their first big wins, with the big payoff of the spending of that Soros money in elections, then being Secretary of State Mark Ritchie's reinterpretation of Minnesota election law to install Al Franken over Norm Coleman as the U.S. Senator. And as they say, the rest is history. So much rolled out of that one race with the 60-vote margin that we still have not recovered from as a country. Fast forward to 2020, and we have the election of 2020, which when I give grades, I talk about elections all the time, of course, and I give America a D grade for the 2020 election, and I will talk to you about where I think we are now later. I don't want to give everything away right up front. But the right of center world finally woke up and got in the game. And some of you have been engaged for long before that. But you also know that other people on our side weren't really listening. I can tell you I won an election in a very difficult Republican year, 2007, in a recount. Every recount in every state is a lawsuit. It's always fun to have the sheriff show up at your house and, hey, your election keeps going. And it's even funner when there's a child born in that 6-week window. That makes things exciting. More exciting. But I learned a lot in that process. And a lot of it was very ugly. But I can tell you that many of my fellow legislators' eyes just glazed over when I started talking about the nuts and bolts of elections. And what didn't work, much of it to me rather obvious. It's a terrible impediment to be left-brained in government, because government is not logical. And it is extremely frustrating. I had to adjust, recognizing that most people do make decisions in their right brain. And as a left-brain person, I had to adjust and just accept reality. We're conservatives, so we accept reality and deal with it instead of thinking we can legislate around it or create a narrative that somehow changes what the truth is. And for better or worse, we're burdened with recognizing that reality. And I'm so glad to be in a room full of people who are committed to truth and the first principles of this country. Those all go together. They all go together. So I'm going to share tonight with you on the election front 3 things that work for us in Virginia that you can do here. Virginia is not much better off politically than you all are. Yes, we do have a Republican trifecta right now, meaning governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general. That we haven't had a single office statewide since I was part of a trifecta in 2009. The Democrats have won all of them since then, to great harm to Virginia. And if you look at how our elections have gone over 20 or 30 years, it doesn't look like a great trend. And as I tell people, unlike Minnesota, the bigger you grow the federal government, the more we lose in Virginia. Because more and more big government people move into Northern Virginia and vote for more and more big government. And it gets harder and harder to win in Virginia. When I won the Attorney General race in 2009, I won 58-42. Glenn Youngkin did a spectacular job in his gubernatorial race, and he won by 2.5 points. And he spent even with the Democrats. We don't have spending donation limits in Virginia, so that's a real issue. I was outspent by $15 million in my governor's race and lost to Terry McAuliffe by 2 points. Glenn Youngkin spent even with Terry McAuliffe I played Terry McAuliffe in debate prep. I'd had a little experience by that point in time. And he beat him by 2.5 points. But Virginia is tilting your way. And all the people I thought were crazy lunatic communists that serve with me in the Senate are being knocked out by people who are much crazier, much more lunatic, and much more communist in their primaries. That's who is coming in. And I don't think the average American, average Democrat even, who lives on your street realizes quite what's coming in. So I want to talk about some things that have worked for us. And then I'm going to talk about a piece of immigration you don't hear much about, that you're going to give you something to look for going forward, because I do run the Election Transparency Initiative, and I'm also a senior fellow for Homeland Security and Immigration at the Center for Renewing America. So tonight, for the price of your ticket, you get 2 speeches for the price of 1. An LEA bargain. But the 3 things that have worked. I remember one quote from Glenn running for governor. I happened to catch this interview on the radio. The Democrats had House, Senate, and the governorship for 2 years, 2019 and 2020. We have odd year elections for our state elections. And they made over 60 changes, really led by Mark Elias, Twitter lawyer Mark Elias in Virginia, made enormous changes. And Glenn Youngkin, as governor, has never had a house in the Virginia General Assembly, so he has not been able to undo those things. He has been able to run the Board of Elections better. He has been able to get us out of ERIC and do a few other things. But not change the law, because we recognize to change the law, you have to pass a bill and the governor has to sign it. You don't just get to elect a Mark Ritchie and rewrite the law. That isn't how we operate. And he said, I don't like these rules, but these are the rules. And we need to win by these rules. And like you, give or take 1 day, we have an election season, not an election day. You all have the distinction of having the longest election season in the country by 1 day at 46 days before election day. We are at 45. It is terrible, exhausting. I have a litigation going right now that pure happenstance. I've talked to the longest serving registrar in Virginia, who's in Petersburg, Virginia, a 90% Democrat city. And she says the elections are too long. She says you shouldn't use the mail. And she also says, when the heck am I supposed to do my laundry? Who needs this? Nobody needs this. Nobody needs this. There are other reasons you might want a 45-day election season, but none of them are good reasons. None of them are good reasons. But Glenn Youngkin started cranking up the turnout machine in mid-September and not near Election Day, and it worked for him. It worked for him. What also worked in that election, and I know there's dispute about early or late, but the point is you got to win with the rules you've got. And one of the Virginia responses to the 2020 debacle was to recruit election officials to be hired on the temporary basis that every election office hires folks, because you ramp up personnel to run the elections. And the left is far more represented inside those offices than we are. We recruited and trained. I say we. This was a grassroots move. There were no national organizations had anything to do with this. None of them. And yet, over 4,000 new election officials were recruited, trained, and kind of injected into the system all over Virginia. And one of those new officials spotted the Fairfax County, our biggest county, million population, where I grew up. Registrar, that was our director of elections, that's the title. Every state calls those offices different things, was letting in these mass mail ballot requests that nonprofits put out to targeted audiences But in Virginia, one of the things they forgot to unfix was we actually have a form of voter ID. If you want to request a mail-in ballot, you got to give us the last 4 digits of your Social Security number. Well, those nonprofits don't have that number. So when they print out that form with the voter who may or may not live at that address's name on it, they don't have that on there. Well, those were getting mailed in by the hundreds anyway. And the Fairfax registrar said, we'll send out ballots anyway. Well, nobody would have known but for one of those newly trained folks and PILF, public interest law firm led by Christian Adams, sued and lost on standing. And you know what? Those 300 incorrect ballot absentee requests were dropped just by shining the light on them. They lost the lawsuit and won the battle and learned it was going on in 2 other counties. That's what new blood will do and what numbers will do. As the Russians like to say, quantity has a quality all its own. And the left outnumbers us in these spaces, and we need to fix that. This is citizenship duties. And we can get in and we can run the poll books and we can take those steps. That became known as the Virginia Plan, and they took it. The Virginia Plan became adopted by what is now called the Election Integrity Network, which some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with. I know some of you participate in it. And that was taken around to now over half the states. It's been very effective. I know you have restrictions in Minnesota on who can access those polling places. That's part of how they want to keep you blind, the mushroom treatment, feed them crap and keep them in the dark. And that's a mushroom treatment going on. Nonetheless, every place you can get trained individuals into place, you should, and you can. Second, you target people to the worst problems, and that means local takeovers wherever you can get them, because you, in your state, as I understand it, election structure is built locally, officially. And that means people have to run locally to be there and have the spine, because the other side will scream and yell at you and the press will write mean things, as was noted in the comments part of what used to be my Facebook page. But I don't, being a modern husband, I don't give my wife many instructions, but I did set down one rule when I was running for office. Don't read the comments. They're horrible people. You got to put in the effort. A lot of it is unglamorous. Winning these local elections matters. I hope all the senators here help those people run for those offices in your districts, because you need to win those races one at a time to be in a position to have your team shining the light on what's going on inside these offices. And that brings me to the third item where we share some experience. In 2020, Governor Northam in Virginia, we have a statute that says if you're going to count ballots that arrive after Election Day, they have to have a postmark on Election Day or before. Sound kind of familiar? Yeah. And he said, we're not going to worry about that this year. And the election came and went, but lawsuit was filed. I actually think this one was PILF also, public interest law firm. And the case carried on into the next year, and we won. And we won. And the precedent was set for the future. And we've shrunk that window of that problem by carrying the case forward and fighting it out. Here, he didn't know I was going to call him out. Of course, I didn't know he was going to wear a Valentine's Day suit. But Eric Lucero's, he ducked out, didn't he? He brought a lawsuit that culminated in 2020 with one of Steve Simon's, Secretary of State Steve Simon's sue and settle schemes. And Mark Elias was a lawyer on the other side, Twitter lawyer, and Steve Simon wanted to get around what the legislature had done, written into law. And to Eric's credit, then in the House, and another plaintiff, name escapes me, apologies to Jason, I think, last name escapes me. They brought that case and it went all the way to the 8th Circuit. And the 8th Circuit ruled you can't simply sue and settle your way around the legislature making the law of the state. That is a huge win that is going to have repercussions around the entire country well into the future. Well into the future. Those litigation impacts are slow. We're Americans. We want everything yesterday. They're slow, but especially at the appellate level, getting to the Circuit Court of Appeals level, that is a big deal that will also be persuasive in other circuits and to the Supreme Court. You can fight and you can win. Doesn't mean you will always win, but I promise you this, you won't win if you don't fight. You won't win if you don't fight. And you can expose an awful lot of what the other side is doing in the course of those fights. Fights are educational opportunities. That's what they are. Conflict is an educational opportunity. It's not a time to call the other side names. It's a time to call the other side out. Make them defend an impossible position and explain why it's impossible and do it over and over and over. And remember, if you are in this room, you are not normal. You are in the tail end of the bell curve of paying attention to politics and policy. And God bless you for it. We need that in a representative democracy. We've got to have people who are paying attention. We've got to have people going to represent us. But don't think everybody else you run into is as versed in these things as you are. I'm reading a book right now about Clementine Churchill, Winston's wife, and it brought to mind a collection of Churchill quotes that I put together. And he has one that I'm sure you've all heard. I'll paraphrase it. If you have a point to make, don't be subtle. Use a pile driver. Say it, tell them what you said, and say it again. And punch them right in the face with it. Very Winston Churchill. But that is what we need to do in an educational, positive, optimistic way. Doesn't mean you won't see me on CNN in a shouting match with somebody. Hey, I am not for unilateral disarmament. It has never worked in the history of the world unless you are God. Works for him. It's never worked for regular human beings. So we do have to fight when it's time to fight. But for most people, we need to educate. We need to educate. And the other side has more money. Time is tough and painful, especially for us Americans who are impatient. And you're going to get a lot of public pressure. You still need to fight. That's also, by the way, what's impressive about your 11 award winners is this all seems nice and friendly in here. And it is in here. Ask them all how friendly it is out there to be right in the eyes of first principles in Minnesota. It's pretty tough, and I give you all a lot of credit for that. And I appreciate the work and the sacrifices and that of your families, even on their birthday. And I do want to finish the election piece of this with just a side note on a real thing you all can do that can help in Minnesota, and that is especially leaning on your Republican congressman right now to pass the SAVE Act, which finally puts teeth in the citizenship requirement of federal elections across the country. And don't ignore the Democrats. When this passed Congress, the House, I want to say in September. Democrats voted for it. Not many, but I think post-election, a whole lot more will. I think a lot of them are very afraid of this issue. In a state like Nevada, swing state, just a couple of points, President Trump wins that state. It was over 70-30 on citizenship and voter ID. Over 70-30 referendum running at the same time. There's only so many times you can run into the face of 70-30 and expect to survive politically. And I don't know how many folks who didn't support it last time are thinking about that this time. But the environment has changed. It changed in Germany. J.D. Vance brought quite a message over there on free speech and immigration. The election in Germany brought a real message. But interestingly, in Denmark, the left-wingers won, and they are tough on immigration. And they are tough on immigration for two reasons. One, because they know that unlimited, unskilled immigration undercuts workers' wages. They care about their poor people. I care about our poor people. You may not know that in the end of 2019, just before COVID hit, under Donald Trump's presidency, we achieved the lowest poverty rate in the history of that statistic. The president didn't know it till I told him. A lot of people on our side of the aisle don't focus on poverty and the poor, and we should, because what we believe is better for the poor. Fact. The other reason Denmark, the left-wingers in Denmark, are quite staunchly restrained on immigration is because they have a welfare state and they want to keep it. And they're quite upfront about that. And we can't afford a welfare state if everybody can pour over the border and just dip into it. You know, if you go back 10, 15 years, Bernie Sanders used to say this before he wanted to run for president. Of course, Jesse Jackson was pro-life before he wanted to run for president. So was Al Gore, and so was Teddy Kennedy. You know, people sell out on both sides. On both sides. I'll give the lefties in Denmark credit. They're being real upfront about why. And they, by the way, take on this notion that it's just racist to be tough on immigration. They say there are other good reasons to be tough on immigration. And they're right. And they're right. If you think America first and you care about America's poor people, and yet you support an open border, you don't care about America's poor people. You're knocking down their wages and you're taking away their jobs. And I don't know if anybody got the memo yet. We're bankrupt. We're so bankrupt. We're so much more bankrupt than any company could ever be. 36 trillion in the hole and counting. That's the only set of left-wingers I know of anywhere in the world that's tough on immigration. That's not who it was in Germany. It was the right of center party, and all the others are trying to form a government without them. So what challenges do we have ahead? It's been a heck of a month since Donald Trump was sworn in on the immigration front. I was the deputy secretary at DHS. We didn't get DOJ. We didn't have FBI agents and DEA agents helping us do our job. We had 340 officer injuries in the summer of 2020 just in Portland, Oregon, protecting that stupid courthouse. 340 officer injuries. You know how many FBI agents we got? 2. And we had to get them kicking and screaming. Now they're showing up helping with deportations and pickups, which, by the way, any police officer can do. They're all trained to do it. But let's look at the logistics. Good generals know tactics. Great generals know logistics. Let's do some numbers. The president has promised to deport more illegal immigrants than any president in history. He's kind of moved around a little bit on what that number might be. He said all of the ones that came here under Joe Biden, that'd be around 10 million. So you can scale up what I tell you here. To deport 1 million a year, 1 million a year, that's 3,000 a day. Every day. I made it a 360-day year so we get a couple of breaks in there. It's about 3,000 a day. That is 40 passenger jets with 75 deportees every day. You actually have to have the jets. You have to have the pilots. And much tougher than that, you have to have all the paperwork done. The Department of State has to suddenly be interested in deporting people. We didn't have that in the first Trump administration. Marco Rubio suggests he's interested in that. We didn't have a Secretary of Defense who wanted to defend the border, much less go to the border, much less in his first 2 weeks after being sworn in as Secretary of Defense Hegseth has done. It's a different world now, folks. But these logistical challenges are real. They're real. And they're not sexy. But if you want to ramp up to the kind of numbers to achieve the goals Donald Trump has laid out, there's a lot more coming. Remember, right now there are about 7,000 ERO agents. Those are the ICE agents that do removal. There's about 5,000 HSI agents, Homeland Security investigators. So 12,000 total in ICE. We're moving 3,000 a day. If you have any law enforcement friends in here, they'll tell you, you don't send 4 people to get 1. You send more. You send more. And we need to send more. Because if you come across your target, which, by the way, is just not an easy thing to do, you just don't pull out a phone book. You got to find all these folks every day while removing the 3,000 for that day. You getting the logistical challenge I'm talking about? We're going to need about 10 times as many immigration judges as we have. We're going to need about 10 times the number of immigration lawyers, prosecutors, that we have. But Secretary of Homeland Security can pass a regulation and let non-lawyers bring those cases, as is already allowed, by the way, for immigration organizations. So we let them operate cost effectively. About time we did it. It's about time we did it. Going to need about 5 times as many ERO officers to do removal numbers like we're talking about here. And this assumes you're going to get help out in the field from FBI, DEA, and occasional local officials, local and state. That's going to vary state by state. And this assumes they're doing nothing else except finding folks and removing them. Again, I'm just trying to paint you a picture of how big a logistical mountain President Trump is attacking here. Mind you, I'm rooting for him, of course. I want this to happen. But you got to build to do it. You've got to build to do it. You've got to build this logistical pipeline. Another way to do this is encourage. I can't believe that Mitt Romney came up with a phrase we use in this discussion, self-deportation, back from the 2012 presidential election. And the way you achieve self-deportation is you use the regulatory process the president controls to restrict work permits as much as legally possible, literally to the legal minimum. and eliminate the temporary protected status. You see that if you're watching the news, you're seeing more of that happen. And you add workplace enforcement. We only had one major workplace enforcement engagement in the first Trump administration. You all may remember the raiding of the chicken plants in Mississippi in the summer of 2019. About 650 illegal aliens were picked up in these plants, and the deportation process was begun. And those employers were prosecuted. And that has to happen. That has to happen. Yes, people coming here illegally have broken our laws. We have our own fellow Americans who are keeping the wages of our fellow Americans down by facilitating this. And that is not acceptable to me as an American citizen. And when you hear people say, oh, these are jobs people won't do, and it's hard for me to think of a better example than working in a chicken plant. You know what goes on in there. You know what happened the week after these 650 folks were arrested? They had a job fair. And poor black and white American citizens showed up in droves, interview after interview, about how grateful they were to have this job. There are no jobs Americans won't do. Those don't exist. If someone is saying that to you, you might not want to point it out to them. Little hint, you're talking to an elitist. That's who says that. Americans, and our part of how we made ourselves a great nation, is carrying forward and expecting a work ethic. And what happened after that worksite enforcement in 2019 convinced me Americans are still there. They'll work hard. They'll do tough, grungy jobs if you'll pay them a wage. And by the way, we don't need minimum wages. If we get rid of the illegal competition for our poor American workers, and I just mean poor economically, their wages will go up. And I love how the liberals are so concerned all of a sudden with food prices. Isn't this amazing? This is amazing. Oh, well, your strawberries are going to cost more. Well, then so be it. That's what's supposed to happen. It's called an economy. And if you don't play around with it, including the labor part by letting in 10 million illegals, things settle out. Some prices will go down. Some prices will go up. But I'll tell you what, a bunch of poor Americans will come off the welfare rolls and have the dignity of work and supporting themselves and their families. And that's the way this country should go. So we, wrapping up and just getting to questions, we've improved outside of Minnesota on elections since 2020. You all are in one of the downward trending states. Michigan is another. I don't know what it is about the M's, but Nevada is another. All the other swing states got better. My rating, I told you my 2020 grade is a D. My 2024 grade is a B minus. It varies widely depending what state you're in, but that's the national grade. That also your kid comes home with B minus report card. You're not super excited, unless the last one was a D. Then things look pretty good. But we have a lot more work to do as a country. The SAVE Act will help us go farther. It's also a great narrative opportunity for us to educate our fellow Americans, including some of the crazy ones some of you state senators have to serve with. But no one's beyond redemption, right? Intellectually. We got to keep trying. And on immigration, what I described to you today is intended to give you kind of a scratch pad for what to watch happen over the next 6 months or so as they work to build this infrastructure needed to achieve the goals this president is clearly committed to achieving on immigration. So I hope that was all helpful to you all. I'm happy to take some questions, and you can tell me how long to go or not. But I'm happy to take some questions if anybody's got any. Yeah, Jimmy, you get to start.
Yeah.
And I'll repeat questions so y'all can hear.
We just drove down to Sioux Falls over the weekend, and Sioux City, Idaho, and we drove through several cities that have major food processing sites.
We just drove through major cities like Worthington and that have a lot of these big food processing facilities that house a lot of illegal immigrants. In fact, one of the billionaires in Minnesota built a hotel in Mankato to house illegal immigrants for his facility for processing. And I think the self-deportation thing is actually could account for removing millions of illegals from America just by removing their jobs.
Yep.
And I noticed Kristi Noem's TV ad. Have you guys seen that one? Kristi Noem talking about how, if you leave now, then you can come back, but if you don't, we're going to remove you. But there's no subtitles, and it was all in English. And I know there's some Canadians here that need to leave, but what would be the purpose? I mean, what would be the purpose of that ad?
So first of all, let's be clear. Part of what's going on, not just in the Department of Homeland Security, is the projection of a very tough image, both personally for some of the players, but also for the policy of the administration. And I'll tell you, the Remain in Mexico program was very successful in the first term. Didn't bring the flow to zero at the border, but the reason it was successful is the reason she's aiming at with these ads. If you are sitting in San Salvador and you are thinking of literally putting your life savings in the hand of some coyote to take your family up across the U.S. border, and once you hand that money over, you're never getting it back, and you know it, you want to know you're going to make it. And they are making it as clear as they possibly can to that hypothetical guy making that hypothetical decision. You are wasting your money. You are throwing it away. Don't do it. Don't do it. I'm telling you, the belief around the world in the commitment of America determines how they decide that question. And under Joe Biden, it stopped being just San Salvador, and it literally went to the whole world, which is much more difficult for us. Repatriation to Mexico, easy. Repatriation to the Western Hemisphere, challenging for the State Department. Not terrible logistics. Deportation to Asia and Africa, very difficult. Much more difficult logistically. You're never going to fill a plane going to one place. It's not going to be 75 people on that plane very often because you're going to have this scattered gathering of folks, and your logistics get much tougher, your costs go up, and you get slowed down. And by the way, I didn't say anything about the lawsuits. You're getting sued left and right. Well, left and left. But that you have to deal with that too. And this is a very complicated management task. It's a very complicated management task. And it's never been done before. This is the biggest domestic undertaking in our lifetimes. We've done things this big overseas, and they've all been the military. We've never done anything this big domestically. I will say this. Donald Trump has come to this second term with the determination to do it. I helped start the DeSantis Super PAC. Part of the reason I helped start the DeSantis Super PAC, I'm not anti-Trump by any means, is because he wouldn't do these things in the first term. Well, he's arrived determined to fix that in the second term. So, John?
You have a question? Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
I can, but not because of the mic.
How about now? Whoa. Can you hear me now? I've been in several unions in my life. Currently, I am in the AFSCME Retirees Union, which is affiliated with the AFL-CIO Retirees Union, and I go to their conventions because they don't get people to show up. So I go to keep an eye on them
Good for you.
I also ran for office, Minnesota House of Representatives, but got defeated by the unions who wouldn't even talk to me about endorsing, but they endorsed the kid who I ran against who's never been on a union in his life. So I go at them to show the hypocrisy. But how do we stop AFSCME, the public sector unions, especially those who work at a desk? I got in because I was plowing the highways.
Right.
All right. That's a different breed than the people who are sitting at some office building and taking home a government paycheck. It's going to, how do we get rid of it? How do we slow it down?
FDR and JFK said there was no reason for public unions to exist.
Yes.
I mean, you want to talk about a conflict of interest. It's massive. And as you well know, my first race, because I voted for the budget, I was elected in a special election, so I came in off cycle. I only had one vote on my teachers union scorecard. I had 100% rating. They never talked to me either. They poured money into my opponent, which I didn't object to a great deal. But it doesn't really matter, right? Because the leadership of that union is about something very different than the traditional proper role of a union that you're not compelled to participate in. And they have no place in government. They have no place. Now, the President Trump, this is just my commentary, he courted some unions. I don't see, and you see who he nominated for labor. I mean, she's extremely pro-union. So, and now we see people like Senator Josh Hawley putting in legislation, hardcore conservative, that is really seeming to move in that direction. And if it weren't for the union's attempt to compel people to participate and to deny freedom to workers, not give them freedom, deny them freedom, I'd be fine with unions. But they still have no place in government. Government is about, that's what elections are for. And so at the federal level, the president can declare officers, for example, immigration judges, believe it or not, are unionized. And the president can declare them national security officers and wipe the union out instantly. And if I were the president, I would do exactly that. He has that authority. There are powers he can use to weaken the public unions, but I think he's in a mode right now where he's trying to be friends. He does like everybody to like him, despite his demeanor. And I mean, I know him personally. What you see publicly, he's as authentic as they come. He's that way behind closed doors too. So he's a rough and tumble guy. But even with all that, he really wants people to like him. And I wish he'd get over it. John, question?
As you probably know, Minnesota is the place where election integrity goes to die.
Yeah.
So switching on your election integrity hat, what should Minnesota do and what resources are available to get our elections back to actual election integrity?
So you really have to start at the local level and both inject people but also run races. And for those, when they're using patterns of cheating, you've got to have people on the inside to identify it and call it out. And it's easier to do in the smaller places and work your way to the bigger ones, which are more left-leaning the bigger you go, right? Typically speaking. And so you call the whole system into question. Doesn't mean they aren't gonna leave you in a position like Glenn Youngkin. I don't like these rules, but these are the rules. They win by these rules, and overcome those. But and there's debate about how to go about that in terms of tactics. I will say that from a national money standpoint, because 26 is an opportunity if you have a credible Senate candidate, for example, or gubernatorial candidate, and people outside the state see that. Minnesota hasn't been a wipeout state. Nobody thinks it's beyond hope. Nobody outside Minnesota, sorry. So, so you do have to have a shot. As I recall one political chair saying, I don't want to fund landslides or lost causes. And good. Because there's only so many dollars to go around, and the other side has more of them. Although the monies they were getting from USAID seem to be drying up. So that's nice. And by the way, that's going to matter. That stuff really matters because it finds its way back into the election process funding of these so-called nonprofits. So,
our Secretary of State, Steve Simon, sends me a fundraising letter every couple of days for the Democratic Party. I just can't understand how a Secretary of State could be so partisan and be in charge of elections. Is there anything that can be done to fight that conflict of interest?
Well, not every state has partisan secretaries of state. I mean, Virginia doesn't, let me put it differently. Not every state elects their Secretary of State. So Glenn Youngkin appoints the person who is the executive director, if you will, at the state level. And because Glenn has a business background and isn't particularly partisan, she is Republican as he is, but she's really just about the business of doing the job well. And that's really not describing Steve Simon. And that really just varies state by state. We only elect 3 statewide offices in Virginia. We used to have what's called a long ballot, like Texas does, of 15 statewide offices. Probably you near the camera, but just a guess. But you all, I think, have 4, right? You have the public auditor as well, and we don't elect that either. Of course, ours isn't worth much. Our public auditor just covers for the bureaucracy instead of actually trying to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. Yeah. Well, that boy, I'll tell you, this Doge stuff makes me drool. I mean, ripping this junk out is, part of why I ran for statewide office, and we did a lot of it in the AG's office, but not like an auditor's supposed to. And that's really just a structure of your government. And all 50 states are different about how they go about doing that.
So I have a question as far as the Department of Homeland Security. So I grew up outside of Travis Air Force Base in California, and the land outside of the base, this company bought it up, and it was a quiet acquisition for like over $1 billion. And it was right next to the military base. And then we started noticing that other land outside of military bases was being bought up. And then there was word that China was buying it up. So I want to hear your input on that.
So there is a cross-government committee, if you will, run by the Treasury Department, which is a problem because they care about Treasury, not Homeland Security. And so the bias there is built in. And where foreign acquisitions are analyzed under various conditions, there has been more and more scrutiny given to Chinese purchases of all kinds, and they've already bought a ton of stuff. I mentioned, how bankrupt we are. I would point out that we defeated the Soviet Union by spending them into the dirt. That was a strategic decision by Ronald Reagan on the defense front, and it worked. Great countries are built on great economies and can thus have great militaries. Well, we make our military so expensive, as Elon Musk would say, we build the F-35 fighter in 48 states so every congressman can get a piece of it. And we make it 5 times more expensive than it has to be and less reliable probably than it otherwise would be. Well, China doesn't do that. And right now, China is doing to us as we did to the Soviet Union. And don't forget that. They can build cheaper, and they're doing it. And if we want to try to keep pace with that while we're already bankrupt, we're going to dig a deeper hole. What's the first rule of holes? When you're in one, stop digging. And I don't just want to be able to defend my country in 2025. I want to be able to defend it in 2045 as well, when I'm gone and my children need a country defended, and my grandchildren. And that is not how we're running our government right now. And the skepticism over China has been growing for a long time. It didn't even go away under the Biden administration, though he was weak about it. The agencies kept keeping an eye on these transactions and so forth. Now, there's just a lot bought up by the Chinese here. But, China's not going to take over America. We're going to implode because we spend ourselves into the dirt. It's far more likely outcome of the negative outcomes. So,
question. So I love states' rights, and I always try to fight for states' rights here. Is it our thing?
I'm always a supporter of states' rights, and I imagine that someday we could be a conservative state and push back against the liberal federal government. When it comes to the SAFE Act, where the federal government is trying to inject itself into state elections, because the states, the legislature sets the time, place, and manner of elections, not the federal government. When is it appropriate for the federal government to come in and inject itself into how we run our elections? I know we want to change the way Minnesota runs our elections, but what's appropriate?
A lot of what's going on with the SAVE Act, I wouldn't say any of it is new. The federal government, if you think of motor voter in the 90s, Help America Vote Act in the early 2000s, and so forth, I'll just put it in simple terms, probably never happens in the Minnesota legislature. These bills weren't written well.
No.
And, yeah, I figured it didn't happen here. Yeah. And when you add how courts, including Justice Scalia, have interpreted some of these, they've tied the state's hands. They've made it, under current law, federal law, impossible to check citizenship effectively, completely. And the SAVE Act is intended to go clean that stuff up and allow us to actually enforce the law on the books that only citizens get to vote in federal elections. Now, Arizona keeps 2 voter rolls. And in theory, non-citizens could vote in the state elections. Actually, the way it works right now under current law is Arizona's tougher on the state voter roll list than federal law allows them to be on the federal voter roll list. But you don't get to vote in the Arizona elections if you don't prove citizenship. No other state has gone to the trouble of doing that. Texas is looking at doing it now. The SAVE Act makes that more valuable because it gives you an enforcement mechanism on the citizenship front where we've had our hands tied. And I won't go into all the law about how that's happened, but it's a mess. It's just a mess. And the SAVE Act is largely intended to fix their own mess. It's not really new law. I'm as sensitive as you suggest about leaving states alone. States have had the right and have run our own elections by and large for 250 years. Like I was a Virginia AG, with some exceptions where we literally did have systemic racism. In Virginia, we had it. And there, the Federal Civil Rights Act was utilized to step in and fix that problem. And I believe we have fixed that problem. The Supreme Court believes we have fixed that problem, or they at least believe that Congress hasn't demonstrated we haven't. Sorry to sound like a lawyer there, but that's the Jefferson County case of 2013. And, so by and large, with that very important exception, states have run elections. The feds have put requirements on at various times, including the citizenship requirement. In the beginning of this country, you didn't have to be a U.S. citizen to vote because they so desperately wanted more people coming. They had what appeared to them to be endless land. And they wanted to bring people in to fill it. And that's not where we are today. Of course, they also all showed up at the courthouse and raised their hands to vote. It's kind of tough to cheat. but a little easier when they started putting it on paper. But that's just it. That's the history there, and that's why the SAVE Act is so important. And it's so far it's stayed narrow. It's stayed very narrow. Yeah, Marty. Oh, it's on. Say it's on.
Ken, I wanted to make a more of a comment. The Virginia plan that you mentioned, Kim Crockett, when she ran for Secretary of State, tried to mimic that. She thought that was her only chance of winning. One of the things was to come up with eyes on every ballot. And she came up with, well, Shannon Brain's here. Raise your hand, Shannon. She was chair of her campaign. Yes. And came up with the brilliant idea of passing out business cards to Republicans to be election judges that sent them to the state party to sign up to be election judges. They got like 25,000 Republicans to sign up for that. It had never had more than 3,000.
Right.
The state party did nothing with that list. They never sent any instructions out, never contacted them at all.
Competency counts.
And there was a video put together training for them that Dale sponsored in his studio. They wouldn't put that out either. So it's more of a challenge to the legislators in here, so the legislators, to wake the state party up,
right,
or literally go in a different direction.
Well, I will say the Virginia plan was not implemented by the Virginia Republican Party.
Right.
For those of you involved in the Election Integrity Network, you might recognize the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, our local Tea Party chapters, literally just groups of people who got together organically in jurisdictions around the state, just found each other and began training and figuring out who knew what and could share it, and grew it and grew it and grew it. And then the National Republican Committee came in 2021 and said, look at all this great stuff we did. That sound familiar? They do nothing better than take credit. And that's why I emphasize when I said earlier, no national organization had anything to do with it. The Election Integrity Network didn't exist then. It grew out of that effort in an effort, one, to duplicate it all across the country, and also to add the pieces that needed to be done, to put groups together to look at election machines. That's one group. To look at model legislation, that's another group, and so on, and training systems for election officials, and so on. And it served us well in Virginia. It has served us well in over half the states. And as I said, I know there are people in here who participate in that. And I started as a Republican in Arlington County. For those of you who don't know Virginia geography, Arlington is right across the river from D.C. So you can guess how wonderful those politics are. They haven't elected a Republican dog catcher in 35 years. And I won't even tell you my door knocking stories, but I got some great ones in South Arlington. But definitely not a couple's undertaking to do. That's just it's too ugly. But it's that kind of grinding work that we have to do in the tougher spots, and you guys live in one. Truth is, so do I. Virginia's a little better than Minnesota, but only a little. It looks a lot better because we've got Glenn and Winsome and Jason there right now, but they got there by 2.5, 2, and 1.5 points. And they were the only wins in 12 years. So, and we've lost both houses. So it's pretty tough. We're in a similar position, and if we don't win the governor's race this year or the House, which is 51-49 in Virginia, we're going to be right with you guys next year.
I want to ask you about one part of your service that we haven't talked about at all tonight, which is your time on the coronavirus task force. And I think that the 2020 election, unlike the 2024, which was made it too big to rig, I think what made that riggable was the development of the daily coronavirus briefings from and the constant advice from all the
experts.
Yes, the experts, Anthony Fauci, Deb Birx, and so forth, telling us how we had to live each part of our lives. And so I'm just wondering, what did your experience on that, if you had any thoughts, and how we avoid that ever happening again?
Well, it was pretty surreal. So in the middle of January, the president, we had a conversation, and he put me on there. There were 7 of us on the original coronavirus task force. Now, in the conference room we met in, which is the Situation Room, which is really just a big fancy conference room, it was packed wall to wall with people. So I'm not sure how relevant it was that I got to sit at the table. That was cool. I felt kid at the card table. But, and Alex Azar was the HHS secretary at that time running the coronavirus task force. And you may recall at the end of January, the monumental decision to cut off travel from China was made. It seemed like a no-brainer to me. And amazingly, the academic literature suggested it wouldn't do anything. But I also had the great privilege of losing the first argument to Tony Fauci on February 10th. Boy, if I knew then what I know now. I hadn't read RFK Jr.'s book on Tony Fauci then. I didn't know about the connection between him and Deborah Birx and Bob Redfield and so forth. And I lost an argument to nothing. I made a case based on math, and I told you as an engineer, and uncertainty theory, and we went into some of the discussion on some really empirical stuff. And Fauci literally shrugged his shoulders like, eh. And Alex Azar, I can still picture him across the table from me, diagonally across. Well, I got to go with my docs. Your docs haven't said anything. And he went with his docs. And if I knew then what I know now, I would have just walked upstairs to the Oval Office. And I would have repeated the the case. And shrug shoulders don't cut it in the Oval Office. One of the great things about working for Donald Trump was it was not monarchical. You could have it out, including with him, respectfully, of course. But as long as he knew that you knew who the president was when the decision was made, and you were going to go implement that decision and not undercut that decision, then he gave you free rein. And that was not really how the coronavirus task force was running early on. A clear commitment that everybody agreed with me on was, okay, we're going to be completely transparent to the American people. Well, that went away pretty quick without a memo. In early March, late February, early March, the Secretary of Homeland Security realized, gosh, this is really important. I think I want to be on the coronavirus task force. And so I was unceremoniously booted by the secretary. And I had really been the only person on the task force of the 7 that was a pebble in the shoe at all. And when Chad Wolf took that over for the Department of Homeland Security, there were none left. Not on the coronavirus task force. DHS was basically never heard from again, with the exception of the famous press conference where we laid out for the world the life cycle characteristics of the coronavirus, because we did the testing for that in our labs. You might think, why isn't HHS doing this? Because they didn't have the ability to. And I stumbled across our ability to do it because one of the responsibilities of the Department of Homeland Security is to make sure that we, the U.S. government, are in compliance with various treaties, including biological warfare treaties. And to do that, we have various facilities, including our own Level 4 biolab in Maryland in the Fort Detrick area, which I toured and looked at, and we brought a tanning bed into. They had to take it apart. I made them do all sorts of fun stuff. And to see what would clean what would kill what.
And the other fun, this total war story, the other fun thing, it's like going into a pack of geeks. They're all PhDs. They wear these jackets, these white jackets all day. No one had ever visited the facility. I was astonished at how agog these people were that I just came to visit. And this was before coronavirus was going on, but we're in early February 2020 now. And, the societally racking seriousness of it hadn't reared its head. And I said, I'll tell you what, guys, here's what I need. I need you to go to Walmart. And that got some heads looking. I can't wait to hear the rest of this one. I need you to go to Walmart and find a way to clean all of our protective gear that you can buy at Walmart. Because at that time, the only way to clean this stuff was literally a Connex trailer with vaporized hydrogen peroxide to cook all your gear. Well, we can't do that in a CBP facility, a border patrol facility in the middle of the desert. And if this is for real and we didn't know how serious it was at that time, we had to be able to fix this stuff. Well, these guys, they had a field trip. And they did a great job. They solved it. We made a little video about how to use your Instapot, no joke, to clean this stuff. I get a call from the Labor Department. A conservative friend of mine calls up, "What are you doing? You got to take that video down. It's not OSHA compliant." I said, "No problem. So you give me your solution." Well, you got to take it down. I said, "I'm not taking it down. It's not legal." I said, "I'll tell you what. Come on over here and arrest me because I'm ordering it up." "Well, you can't do that." I said, "I'm doing it. Tell you what. You know who runs all the prosecutors in this town? His name is President Trump. You could take it to him and see if he'll take it down. And I'll tell you what, Donald Trump is nothing if not practical. If somebody wanted to tell him some OSHA rule, how far will this thing go?" Yeah. No, he'll be getting feedback. But it was a badly run exercise. And you know what you haven't seen? You haven't seen sort of a rear view mirror honest look at it. And the reason why is out in the States, the Democrats were, as you all know, the nuttiest of all in denying constitutional rights all over the place. The problem was Donald Trump believes this was a success of his performance in the first term. And it wasn't. I'm sorry, Mr. President. It wasn't. You had lots of successes. This wasn't among them. And we weren't transparent with the American people. We were not, particularly about what we didn't know. And it was a lesson in the value of transparency, even when you think it's ugly and everything else. And the coronavirus task force, in my view, was a failure. It was an abject failure, particularly for a country that's supposed to run on the principles that we're built on and that you all are here, frankly, to pay homage to, which I appreciate. So,
We have one more question.
All right. Mr. Smith gets to finish.
Appreciate you. I told you I'd let you know how your speech went. And I'm still here and I'm still awake.
All right, well, that's
a
good.
fantastic speech.
So it's been allowed at this.
No, we appreciate you coming out and sharing your knowledge and your expertise.
Well, thank you.
Our country's been through a lot in the past. Obviously, I don't need to tell anybody here, and things that I never imagined that we'd have to go through. Pick your topic as to which one is the most important. I would argue that election integrity, if without, secure elections, not that those really matters from that point. I'll leave you to rebut that if you have something that you think is more important. But the question I have to tail off of is the argument of early vote action or early vote as the same day. Can we get your opinion on each one of those and your thoughts? And which one do you think that is the most secure?
Oh, same day. There's no match for in-person same-day voting.
Yeah, we have Scott Pressman out there pushing this early vote.
Well, and yeah, and look, Glenn Youngkin did that in his 2021 race, and they did it effectively. I mean, you can look at the numbers day by day because you can track, what's coming in when. And for some of it, we don't have party registration in Virginia, but you can see who votes in what primaries, and you sort of associate them. We treat that as sort of a party identifier, and they move the needle on earlier voting. And they never knew whether it helped them or not till election day, because your question all the way to election day is, are we just moving election day voters earlier, or are we getting more of them? And if you look at the turnout numbers, Virginia gubernatorial races historically for a long time have been below 50% turnout because of this odd year election. He got 67% voter turnout. And so he made it work. That doesn't mean it will work everywhere. I described one of our problems that was worth hundreds of ballots just in one county going on in that election that was caught. Now, I don't know which ones weren't caught. The ones that weren't caught, we will call the margin of cheating that he overcame in that situation. And, you all have less view into what goes on in the process of your elections than we do in Virginia. This happened in Michigan as well. They know that taking away observer rights makes it harder to challenge what they're doing, right? And because it's harder to gather evidence, which makes the evidence that you do gather all the more important. And I do agree with you that our elections are the cornerstone of our constitutional republic. And if we're called the Election Transparency Initiative because we believe transparency is the cornerstone of confidence in elections. We believe you should be able to see literally every single thing in your election except how your neighbor marks their ballot. And I mean all the way down to computer code. So no proprietary systems. We support, and this doesn't exist anywhere yet, open system software only. For you non-geeks, that means that the code is online and you can download it and put it on a machine yourself and run it. And you can see what outcomes you get under all the different circumstances. And that's the direction I believe we need to move. We're talking to a foundation about doing that. It used to be the Democrats were the ones who complained about the machines for 15 years. And they weren't wrong to be concerned. But now that the script is flipped, trust factors change. Scott Rasmussen has been polling for a long time, and after 2016, 56% of Democrats thought the wrong person was installed as president. After the 2020 election, it was that number for Republicans. Interestingly, after 2024, that number dropped for Democrats down to around 40%, which is terrible, but it's the least terrible outcome in a while. And that's the direction we want to go. Now, as was commented earlier, Donald Trump won by enough and won the national popular vote that, you don't try to pull shenanigans in Pennsylvania if you've lost every other state, and it just gets you from 312 to 292 for Donald Trump, which is why that B- grade is so important. We have a lot more work to do. You guys know this. And all the rest of us outside of Minnesota can ask you to do is just do what you can. Doesn't mean you'll succeed. I tell grassroots folks this all the time, especially people who are Christian. I'm Catholic, which is Christian, even with this hope. God bless him. But we are not called to win. We are called to fight. That's what we're called to do. I mean, you know, you're talking about an organization here that's built on revolutionary principles. That George Washington was 3-6 in major battles. He wouldn't have even made hockey playoffs. He won the battle. He won the war. And we won the greatest country in the history of the world through just perseverance, even losing. Virginia was the critical state in the adoption of the Constitution, or not. And in our Constitutional Convention in June 1788, it was Patrick Henry, the greatest anti-federalist in the country, versus James Madison, the greatest federalist and the author of most of the Constitution, in the same convention. For over 3 weeks, they went at it. And Patrick Henry, at that time, Kentucky was part of Virginia. And the Kentucky counties were the swing votes. And to overcome Patrick Henry, who was a far more effective debater than James Madison, and James Madison was sickly, Madison had to promise a Bill of Rights because it wasn't in there. And Madison's view was, if it doesn't say the federal government can do it, it can't. Can you imagine? To get the ballots to win in Virginia, he needed to promise a Bill of Rights. And he had the credibility to be believed. And the vote, the key vote, was 88-80. That is a close vote. 4 people switch sides. No Constitution in Virginia. And if you don't have Virginia, you don't have the rest of it. New York scheduled, the second biggest state, scheduled their convention after Virginia to know the outcome. The vote in New York, 31-29. Patrick Henry lost. And thanks to him losing, we have a Bill of Rights. It's come in handy the last few years. I don't know about you. And I have a funny feeling it's going to come in handy for a lot more years to come. That's winning by losing. You could also look at Jesus Christ as a political. Thank you all very much for having me. Thank you for the work you do every year. So glad you're here.